What's up, YouTube? Ryan Panny here. Hope you guys are doing reasonably well. It is time for a review of the new Bullet for My Valentine record, Gravity, out last Friday, June 29th. Album number 6 from this Welsh metalcore band, who are definitely one of the most commercially successful acts in hard rock and heavy metal in the last decade and a half. Not to mention one of Wales's biggest exports when it comes to heavy music. And their success can be pretty much traced right back to their debut album, The Poison, which was one of those rare albums in the mid-2000s that, much like Avenged Sevenfold's Waking the Fallen a couple years prior actually, was able to successfully cross over to both the mainstream metal audience and the emo-leaning Warped Tour crowd, which didn't happen a whole lot. If you were a kid during this time, or you remember this time in music, you didn't really like Brand New and Trivium. You kind of picked a side. So just purely mathematically speaking, being able to capture fans from both of those worlds almost guaranteed that Bullet were gonna blow up from the get-go, and that's what happened. Their lyrics were angsty and whiny and a lot of the time about chicks, so the emo kids kind of dug it, but the breakdowns in the songs had metalcore written all over them, and there were a lot of riffs and solos in their songs that had a very clear thrash metal influence and a classic metal influence. Acts like Metallica, Maiden were all over their music. So by having elements in their music that kind of appealed to both camps, they kind of had all their bases covered with that first record. And then from there, the second record, Screaming Fire, it was a record that kind of found the band choosing a side of the fence, more or less, and choosing the metal side with songs that were a lot more riff-driven and more holistically metal than The Poison was, although it was still a streamlined and very radio-friendly version of metal. And since frontman Matt Tuck has such a knack for these ear candy hooks, the band couldn't help but go down the radio rock rabbit hole with their third record, Fever, and then their disastrous fourth record, Temper Temper, which is an album that was so bland and so recycled and so mainstream pandering that even Bullet fans got kind of fed up. And the band themselves admitted that it wasn't really their best record. And basically their response to all this criticism was their last record, 2015's Venom, which found the band kind of retracing their steps and tying a neat bow around that aggressive early sound of the bands that the fans had just been yearning to hear. But here we are in 2018 and the reset button has been hit. New record label, new rhythm section, and really an altogether new sound. Gravity is the first Bullet album to feature Jason Bald on drums, Jamie Matthias on bass. It's also their first record for the Finnish heavy metal label Spinefarm, which they were of course early champions of one of my favorite bands, Children of Bodom. It really is just a whole new start for the band. It's kind of like phase 2. So through this record's teaser singles and the reactions to the singles, I've already kind of caught wind of Gravity's slightly poppier, keyboard-laced, more second wave of metalcore sound. But to be perfectly honest, I'm still approaching it with a completely open mind, because let's be frank here, Bullet for My Valentine is not a band that I come to for heaviness or intricacy, so there's not a lot of metal cred hanging in the balance here. If they want to go ahead and make an alt metal record, or make a Crown the Empire or Bring Me the Horizon type record and do it well and execute it well, by all means, be my guest. I don't care. Gojira does that, Dying Fetus does that, it's a different conversation. But if Bullet for My Valentine wants to do it, they've already had one foot in that door. They're pretty much their whole career, so I'm all good with that. I'm curious, I'm open-minded. I want to see if they can pull this off. But unfortunately, my first few spins of this record, it pretty much played like a laundry list of all of my fucking pet peeves with music like this. First, there's the lyrical cliches, like with the opener Leap of Faith. That song uses Fade Away, it uses You Can't Break Me. They're pulling out all the classics for the lyric sheets on this album. The title track is like Build Me Up to Tear Me Down. Break Me Down is used in Piece of Me. And that's just the overused lyrics. We're not even getting into the ones that are just plain juvenile. Like, I bet the song Over It would probably be an okay song if the refrain wasn't I'm so over it, which is a phrase that I'm pretty sure I've never heard come out of the mouth of a male over 14 years old. And if all that weren't enough, we've also got completely unwarranted clapping sections in Under Again, in The Very Last Time, which the latter also features some nice breathy singing for dramatic effect. And then of course, the creme de la creme for me, if you've watched any of my previous reviews, we've got completely unnecessary whoa-oh vocals. The worst offender being the album low point, Not Dead Yet, but I'm also not letting Piece of Me or the title track off the hook either. But all those relatively trivial aggravations aside, what I gathered from more and more listens to this record is that on a more fundamental level, these songs themselves are not very dynamic. With the majority of the songs on this record, once the individual premise is established, the experience of the song is more like this instead of a little bit of this, which is how a song, however catchy it might be, can quickly start to feel lifeless when there's no sense of motion to it or sense of progression to it. Like the ugliest example of that on this record is track 4, Not Dead Yet. Notice how, structurally speaking, this song has absolutely nothing to it. The song opens on the chorus, and then it's verse, chorus, verse, chorus, and then the bridge is just the chorus being repeated again, except with some piano shit behind it. And then if all that weren't enough, if you still didn't get the point, then they repeat the chorus again and let it ride till the end of the song. As a listener, the experience of this, it makes you feel like a dirty tank top that's trapped in a wash machine and can't get out. When there's only 2 parts to a whole song, there's no chance for anything to change, any sort of mood shift, any sort of progression, and to even have even like a whisper of making a song more dynamic or breathing life into it. There's not even a possibility for that. Of course, this could all be exacerbated just by the fact that the parts themselves aren't very good. Piece of Me is another example of a song that makes its point early and then just nothing happens. Like, I'll admit that that rhythmically awkward kind of drone chug that this song centers on, when it first kicks in, it hits hard. It hits powerful, but then it quickly wears out its welcome because the band see fit to use this little rhythm for both the verse and the chorus. Like, there are very, very few riffs on the planet that are that interesting, that you can just stretch like that, let alone a riff that's, let's call it what it is, basically just a 1-note chug at the end of the day. So it might have been cool at the beginning, but then they just run it right into the ground, and by the time the song does shake things up a bit during the bridge and during that final chorus, it's too late. You've already kind of been lulled to sleep. I can't stress this enough. Songs have to feel like living, breathing things. They have to feel like they're spiking and coming down, like a heart monitor at a hospital. You never want this. And this is exactly what happens when, especially on your album, most of the riffs and breakdowns consist of 1 note. Literally consist of 1 note. I mentioned how that Piece of Me section is basically 1 note. That is not the only instance of this on here. The Under Again breakdown, it's that same whatever. It's 1 note just in little chopped up staccato rhythms, like we've been hearing in this style for God knows how long. Letting You Go also has a monotonous 1-note breakdown. Leap of Faith, same shit. Coma too, although I guess that one's slightly more interesting because there's like an odd time jump there. But yeah, most of the riffs on this album are pretty much confined to 1 or 2 notes. And I'm just, as a guitar player, I'm listening to this and just imagining how fucking boring these songs must be to play. Well, when songs are boring to play, a lot of times they're boring to listen to. If you want to make 1 note sound interesting, you have to be like Sleep on the Dope Smoker album, or you have to be like Meshuggah. Which brings me to what I believe is the biggest shift in Bullet for My Valentine's sound on Gravity, which is the role of the guitars. The role of the guitars in this band's sound has drastically shrunk on this album. The guitar parts are no longer plot points in the songs. Rather, they're being used in a more textural or a more percussive fashion to make room for whether it's Bring Me the Horizon style synthesizers, like on the title track or on Under Again, or it's songs that are more vocally driven, like Not Dead Yet or The Very Last Time, or it's those like almost Linkin Park style keyboard passages that happen on Coma and Letting You Go. The guitars are essentially stepping aside to make room for other elements. That's the biggest shift in Bullet's sound on this record. Look, I agree with the band's decision to kind of shake things up on this record because in a way, Venom kind of felt like them closing a chapter of their history, and that's cool. But I just think that limiting the role of guitars this much, that wasn't the right change to make because their music is clearly suffering for it. Now, I don't necessarily hear guitar solos on this album either, so I think that change is all good, but I do think that tuneful lead guitars, harmonized rhythm parts, and songs where a guitar passage is one of the driving forces behind it, those are all much more important weapons in the Bullet arsenal than I think they realized. They can't get by on just hooks and shitty mallcore cliches. These songs just feel like there's something missing. They just do. When I listen to the track on here, Don't Need You, I wonder if maybe that was the direction that the band should have gone in. Because that song, in contrast to the other songs on here, is the one song where, yeah, it throws on the same strings and keys and the production maintains that same emphasis on the staccato rhythms as the rest of the record does. But on this song, the band keep at least a semblance of riffs in the verse and in the bridge. Chorus has those grinding triplets that are played in the second half which adds so much muscle to it. This song is the one instance on Gravity where the band let the guitars do some of the work. And listening to the song over and over again and enjoying it very much so, this is the song where I realized that, okay, taking the guitars out of the equation too much is what ultimately did in these other songs. So Don't Need You might be slightly indicative of the direction the band should go in if they're gonna insist on making their production all syrupy and uber modern. At least keep the goddamn guitar riffs. Those don't need to go out the window too. But all my hatred for this album aside, I do think that Matt Tuck turns in a great vocal performance throughout the album. Singing wise, I don't really have a problem with him. He especially sings his heart out on the other good song on here, the closer, Breathe Underwater, which sending this album off with an acoustic ballad I thought was a classy move. And this song has the one decent set of lyrics on the album. But you know, this album clearly isn't aimed at me. It's got everything that I don't look for in heavy music. But by the same token, it's not so bad that I don't understand why people like it. Matt Tuck's got that same ear for hooks that he's always had. I just think that they changed their sound in the wrong direction, and they just took their formula and wrung it out so much that it was completely dry and there was nothing left. So I hope they continue to experiment. I'm all for it, but this is not the answer. Gravity gets a 4 out of 10 for me. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video and are not yet subscribed, please consider doing so by clicking right over here, or just checking out any of the other rock or metal related content that I publish weekly on this channel. As always, I really appreciate you guys watching, liking, commenting, arguing. Any interaction is good interaction. I really appreciate your support, and I will see you soon.